3 is the intersection of innovation and independence. Where's Dave Michelman? There he is, right there. Dave, this is all you, my friend. I actually believe, and I actually wonder if Dave does too, I think he does, I actually believe we can invent the future. I actually believe independent schools can invent the future of what learning is going to look like. Because if you look historically back over time, organizations that had independence and innovation together, those two I's, form at an intersection, they're pretty hard to hold back. No public constraints, no policy regulations, the opportunity to shape whatever we want, the opportunity to borrow the best-in-class models or create ones that work best for the learner. So we can, not can we, but I really believe we can invent the future. So Dave at Duke School in Durham provided the fodder for this, of which we elaborated a little bit, but not a whole lot. So lots of educators and non-educators alike are talking about the need for innovation in education in schools, no question. Everybody's talking about innovation. I'm actually really bored of the I word because it's ubiquitous with a lot of stuff. It's like excellence. It got overused, right? We end up talking about excellence. I'm like, does that mean anything anymore? But we constantly hear that modern day schools were designed to prepare students for the industrial age. That doesn't exist. That's gone. And not the information age, which is today. So the model's outdated, right? That's kind of what Dave is saying and what a lot of us are saying. In the United States, we know historically schools were designed to prepare our students to run factories and participate in our democracy. That was kind of the model, right? It's the model that most Americans today still actually consume. Maybe not your students, but most people. The major tenet underlying education in America has been that knowledge, which was with the teacher, had to be transmitted to someone who didn't have it, right? The ignorant student. And then once they were imparted with that, then they knew something. And so if you actually got that transmission right, then education was successful, right? That's the model. And we've known that. If anybody's watched Waiting for Superman, you understand the old agrarian model. Our schedules are still set up on it. We got it, okay? So it was essentially a transmission process. Now what we know is that knowledge is no longer scarce. It's not in the beholder of a teacher. It's online. All the knowledge you need is available online. Most of us do go to online sources for information all the time. I've told the story many times, probably to this group, but I still think it's important. There was a time period in my life where I had 3 children living in my house. I just have one today. One's in college. But one of them was, if you saw the movie The Blind Side, you may remember Michael, right? We had our own Michael. We had a young man that we sponsored through the Big Brothers Big Sisters program for about 5 years. But we weren't getting a lot of traction with him, to be honest with you. We got him in 2nd grade. I guess it was in 8th grade that he became part of the Symmonds 5-day boarding program. I'm not joking. He lived on the east side. Sunday night, he'd come in, check into the Symmonds dorm, and he lived with us all throughout the week. And it was very interesting because there was a period of time where I had a daughter at Jesuit High School in Portland, a daughter at French American International School in Portland, and then we had Pedro, who went to Robert Gray Middle School. And they would work just like in the movie The Blind Side in the kitchen on the counter, like next to each other. 2 of them on MacBooks and 1 with a paper and a pencil. And Pedro would sit there and flip through the pages and try to figure out what he was trying to come up with. And I really didn't understand. He literally didn't know where to find information. He would try to fill out a worksheet in 8th grade, and you would see him trying to figure out, where do I find the content that this paper is asking me for in this book? And when we weren't looking, he would look to Jules and say, who was the 14th president of the United States? Look it up real quick, right? He would ask for information to be Googled for him because he knew he could get it much more quickly than actually finding it. Finding information is not hard for anybody at this point. We know that. Knowledge conduition is not the issue. It's wisdom. It's discernment. That's the game we're in. So that infrastructure is completely different, Dave was arguing. That infrastructure for supporting not knowledge transmission but wisdom is completely different. So the model that we have still is somewhat broken in the rest of the country, and you might say at my school that's not the case, we're really good at this. We also hear that education is ripe for disruption. We all heard about innovative disruption. We know models and industries that have experienced innovative disruption. The iPod was an innovative disruption. We know that obviously Uber is an innovative disruption. Southwest Airlines at the time was an innovative disruption. Changed the model. And one of the gifts that it makes for the model is it doesn't make it better for the existing consumer, it actually makes it better for the industry. I mean, I would actually say that the vision of Apple, if you think about Apple, whether you like Apple or not, their vision is to challenge the status quo. And so they've taught every consumer to interact differently with their electronic device. They expect when they see a departure screen at the airport that they can swipe it or manipulate it or pinch it or stretch it, even though you necessarily can't in all devices. They've changed the industry. Uber changing the industry. So that's where we know that education can go, but it turns out that the models I think we're dealing with is incremental at best, incremental change at best. So what's holding us back? Why are we just fine-tuning? And I got to tell you, on a given week, I'm in 2 or 3 independent schools a week. I see a lot of schools. I see more schools than you have all seen in your lifetimes. I travel way too much. We're not blowing up the model and changing it. There's not any innovative disruption really happening yet. I don't see it. But I think we can. And I think we can be the best at it. I think we're still dealing with incremental shifts. The convergence of innovation and independence is what all great disruptions require. And it's the very DNA of what we have in our campuses. It's what we do best. We have it. So why aren't we inventing the future? We enjoy really innovative minds and we enjoy true independence. I think we can. I really do believe we can. 4, get real. The rise of authentic marketing. So if you watch, any of you watched students try to figure out where they're going to go to college today? Take a look at a traditional junior at your school right now. What are they looking at? They're not looking at the view book. That's for mom and dad. And increasingly, it's not going to be from mom and dad. We're going to talk about mom and dad in a second. They're looking at Tumblr. They're looking at Twitter. They're looking sort of at YouTube, but they're looking at the back channel of YouTube, not the main channel, not the one that is produced by the institution. Oh, God, no. Please, not that one. That's like ridiculous. If you do much on research generationally, you're going to pick up on this right away. But if you look at most recent Pew research, trust is the #1 issue for this next generation of consumers. Trust. They have lived in a world of trauma and broken promises. So I'm 49. I knew when I grew up, if you bought a house, it would retain its value. Church was always going to be there. Mom and dad's always going to be there. There are a lot that banking, it was going to turn out just fine. We probably would not have a war on our soil. These are just things that you just kind of grew up with knowing as you were walking to school. That's not what the group in your classrooms has grown up with. They've found not an entitled generation, but a complex and introspective one. Its members have weathered many large public traumas and terrorist attacks, costly wars, the Great Recession, the demise of banking, housing, crisis in our churches. Add to those the images they see on a regular basis of Iraq, Katrina, Oklahoma City, Columbine, and by the way, I'm not talking anymore about the students. I'm talking about their parents. Okay? And they see this over and over and over. These parents are actually looking at your materials now. It's not the student anymore. It's the parent. The parent has changed. The market has changed. For a generation digitally wired from childhood and reared on apocalyptic videos and computer-generated movie epics, not to mention the exploitive hackers, these show the real world super connected, tightly connected. And for that reason, the real world was as easily disrupted as the virtual one. While the grown-ups in charge, that's us, we're the guardians of order. We're overwhelmed and unmatched, always kind of a step behind, right? What's going to happen next? What shoe's going to drop? They want truth. They're cynical. They're deep to the core. They're deep to the core cynical about organizationally directed and produced materials. Their natural state is to find truth. And they're usually not going to find it in what they call first cut materials. Does that make sense? So the amount of money and time and energy, I'm not saying we shouldn't spend money on good materials, but I want you to think about really who you're speaking to. What we're learning more and more and more is we might be actually speaking to each other in this room about how wonderful our materials look because we send them to our colleagues. But increasingly, it's not just the student, it's the parent in the room that's not relating. The rise of authentic marketing tells us that this generation, traditional marketing doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It demonstrates when you do traditional marketing, traditional ads, traditional firsthand, this is how great we are, this is what our school looks like, and staged photos of carefully selected members of our community that look exactly like a sample of our school. They actually understand how out of touch you are as an organization when they see that. If you can't understand them, then how are you going to be able to understand their children who you're trying to teach? Does that make sense? Because marketing at the end of the day is actually a demonstration of how well you understand your client, how well you understand your audience, if you will. So this advice that we're hearing from people is we actually need to get out of the way in our marketing messages. And we actually need to focus on getting involved, getting our faculty and our students involved in our mainstream promotional efforts. How many of you have let's not the right word. How many of you encouraged, inspired, enabled, empowered your students to create mainstream promotional materials that will be the primary messaging that goes out to your prospective students and families? Raise your hand. Well done. That's really, really well done, because that's what they're looking for. And if they don't find it with you, and they assume they won't, what they basically do is they go to the back channel. They look for the real scoop. Now, one more quick piece on this for their parents, because their parents are doing the same thing, especially young parents. If you have elementary or lower school or middle school parents, they're already in this generation of consumption. They're used to being able to look for that information. Here's what they do. All they're doing is doing online what they've done for years, person to person. There's nothing new about this. They go and talk to their friend and they get the scoop on your school. Tell me the real deal. What's really happening with your school? So they want truth. And the quicker we can bring it to them, the more likely they're going to trust us. And that's a really important piece. So this trend, I think, is important. It's about marketing. It's get real. This one is a return to the dark side. Sorry about that. But I feel this is probably one of the few audiences I can share this with, and maybe we can commiserate together, or maybe you're going to relate to it, or maybe you're going to say, gosh, I'm so glad that Ian didn't describe us, because that's not us. Okay, we're in great shape. But we are seeing admissions models that are completely unprepared for the world in which they're operating right now. And keep in mind, 30% of our work is in higher ed. And as you all know, usually higher ed, you get a little bit more sophistication and a lot more sins. In the higher ed world, they got us into discounting. They got us into net tuition revenue models, sophisticated leveraging financial aid schemes. None are guaranteed to work the way that we'd like them in alignment with our mission. They really didn't fix the price problem. They fixed it with a Band-Aid. Does that make sense? Right? So they're operating, but they do have very sophisticated models, and that becomes kind of the way we evaluate things. So from an enrollment management perspective, the admissions world has kind of been turned upside down in the past 10 years. It's completely a different game, okay? We are kind of playing catch up, and we're still functioning in this outdated model. Content, does everybody know what content marketing is? Content marketing is stop describing you as an organization and what you're great at. Start putting out good content. If you just put out good content, great content, let's say you're the progressive leader of schools in your market. What should you be writing about and promoting? best in class, first class, front end, progressive education. Like, we're the leaders at this. And if you do that, actually people like that and they actually pay attention to it. They actually gravitate toward good content. It actually turns out radio and TV has been doing this for generations, right? We'll put up with their advertising if we want their content. If we want to watch the Cubs, by the way, I grew up in Illinois, I live in Oregon now. My dad raised me my entire life to be cynical of the Cubs. He loved the Cubs. Sorry, is there any Cubs fans here? Yeah, so it's like he's having this late in life change of heart. He's like, Ian, they'll always disappoint you. They're always going to like just get that far, but don't ever count on the Cubs. Don't ever count on the Cubs. Every night he's texting me. They're going the whole way. They're going. It's even in Back to the Future. It said in 2015, the Cubs are going to win. I mean, he has convinced himself the Cubs are going the whole way. I'm like, oh, Dad. Sorry. A little sidebar there. The truth is, radio and television has been doing content marketing for years. But we've kind of messed up our promotional materials. And admission directors, and I'm not being critical of, yes I am. As a cohort, we've not trained them in the new normal. We've just not. There have been some good efforts. SAIS has done some really nice efforts, some really wonderful organizations out there that produce good professional development. I don't see our schools, our member schools and our client schools, really putting the money and energy and time into changing the orientation of enrollment management. See, because we're not doing admissions anymore. It's completely different. They used to focus on admissions. Admissions is a process. I want you to think of a hospital. Admissions, there's an admissions office. What do? They admit you to the hospital. They didn't get you there. They're not going to get you out. They're not going to keep you there. They just did one thing, and that was put the bracelet on, you're in, 202. Head up there. All right, the doctor will be in to see you soon. That's admissions. Enrollment management is an intricate system of 7 spokes. Recruitment, retention, research, admissions, financial aid and net revenue, information management, that's all of your systems working together, all your integrated information systems, and marketing communications. That means that your head of admissions, whatever you want to call that person, they actually need to be able to do all of that. All of it. Or know somebody who does that works for them. In an integrated fashion. We're way behind the times when it comes to this. Most enrollment managers deal with 2 of the 3 phases of life stage with an institution, right? There's input, there's throughput, and then there's output, right? Output is really what most advancement efforts are focused on. Input and throughput. It's not just admissions. It's not just gatekeeping or deciding if the student's qualified. Whole different deal. For most of our 230 clients that we've worked, the practices of enrollment management represents 80% or more of the revenue of the organization. Would that be true for you all? What happens with recruitment and retention represents 80% or more of your operating budget. True? Raise your hand if that's true. Right on. Okay? This is far too big of a job for the 3-term board member or the lower school faculty member who the school hires to run admissions. And that's what's happening. What we see everywhere. You know, Sandy really knew our school as a board member after 3 times we had her run admissions. She really gets it. No, she doesn't really get it. Or the I love the lower school faculty. They're so good, they're so connected, they're really kind to people. They're really loving. They know everybody in town. Great, but can they do those 7 things? Again, my 16-year-old is calling me from Portland. I'm just saying, Dad. Enrollment management is a fierce system. It has changed, rapidly changed. Colleges moved to the system 20 years ago. It's really time we actually put the time and energy. So we're literally 20 years behind the time. Some of you in this room are not. I know that because I've had experiences with you. You're running enrollment management offices and you have successfully turned the corner and you are doing this. But very, very few of that is the case. And again, I'm trying to point out trends, not to be critical. So when we really professionalize and create new school systems that reflect the world and systems that we're going into, not where we've been, and when we hire and train and staff and support our enrollment teams to be best in class, we will have arrived. I think it's really important.